West Yorks Police, what's the emergency?
Hello, mate. We're a Skip Hire Waste Management Company. We've just found human remains. They've just found a foot, mate.
Human foot, yep.
Been filled a shredder.
With officers en route, the call is immediately referred to West Yorkshire Police forensic teams.
BCSI, Lucy speaking.
I've got officers at a recycling unit in Yorkshire. They've found a body part.
Crime scene manager Alicia is one of 2 CSIs on duty.
Whiskey Romeo 95.
Alicia and a police rapid response team are immediately dispatched.
All right, thank you.
At the scene, the forensic team head to where the suspected human foot has been found, amid thousands of kilograms of rubbish.
Have you got your camera, Karen? Yeah. The officers are at the scene now.
Perfect.
The team are in no doubt about what they have found. The human foot is placed into a secure evidence box.
Right, these are all sorted. We're just going to pop that into this other bag, aren't we?
I just need to ring HMAC.
Thank you.
IP, it's Alicia. So KMW2. I'll just confirm wet and dry swab of left foot, right side. Okay, and that was seized at 14:39.
The team now need to consider if more body parts might be amongst the waste. Identification of the remains is now a priority. A specialist police search team, Pulsar, have arrived to scour this vast site. Steve Austin is the area forensic manager assigned to the case.
One of the challenges we're going to be met with at this recycling plant is the vast amount of waste that goes through it. I recognise that we could potentially have a lot of animal waste, a lot of food waste that will include bones and flesh. There will be a Pulsar team down there, and it will be a case of us working together in order to look for any body parts, to piece the body back together as much as we can.
Once you drop stuff in there, then I'll just go back in and scoop it up and bring it back out.
OK.
The senior investigating officer is Detective Superintendent Tony Nicholson.
I've been called about this set of circumstance. But one thing I do know is that my best friend today, and probably for every other type of job that I get called about, will be the area forensic manager, who will be able to advise me with significant subject matter expertise around the scene management, the scene preservation and evidential recovery. But they're also a gatekeeper into a lot of other specialist scientific roles, which are going to be, I think, in this case, particularly crucial.
Minute by minute, the crime scene investigators keep the homicide and major inquiry team informed of every discovery on site.
Mr. Nicholson.
Hey, pal, how are you doing? Can you do me a big favour then, please? Just would you mind just having a review the log for us? Give us some consideration around CCTV parameters. I'll have a briefing when I get back, but can you just have a look at the bin companies who've used that site, and then we'll see what the extent of those collections are.
What's your thoughts at this stage? Are we thinking body dump there, or are we looking at potentially it's being brought to the site as part of a skip deposition?
Yeah, really difficult. No idea, quite frankly, at the moment.
Remarkably, the foot remains intact. Given its condition, it has arrived there very recently. The primary goal now is to obtain DNA.
That's pretty fresh, isn't it? The old skin, quite. It's weird, isn't it? Yeah. It could have been skip and then everything's taking a chunk out and stuff flying around. It's pretty fresh.
Identifying the difference between human remains and flesh and bones from animals is a difficult task. So a senior forensics anthropologist has been brought in to help.
The anthropologist will go through all the different pieces of tissue, and the bones for us. They will identify what is human, what is non-human, but aside from that, they can also give us some interpretation about what we're finding.
Steve Austin and crime scene manager Gerard Sadler are shown how the site's heavy machinery works by Sergeant Mick McGowan.
Right, so the process, the stuff that were dropped off Wednesday got dumped here and started to get processed on Friday and Saturday morning. So the process is that big grabber picks the stuff up, drops it into this hopper. The hopper does a lot of shaking about and mangling stuff up, and then it drops down onto the conveyor belt, which then goes up, across, and up here. While the conveyor belt's been going, that's when they've come across the foot coming across the belt. So they've stopped all the production everywhere, thinking that, well, somewhere along this process, or in that pile over there, is the rest of the body, potentially.
In terms of time, what do you think again?
At least 3 days.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to say. Any bits that we find, we can, like say, we'll put to one side. When anthropologist does turn up, we can assess it and be like, yeah, that's a body part, or no, it's not.
Good stuff.
Obviously, it'll be obvious to us what a body part is, but there's just little bones in it. If we start finding things like that.
As day one of the search concludes, the site is secured overnight. Senior Investigating Officer Tony Nicholson recognises the immense task ahead.
Well, what do we know so far? Not a great deal. Well, at the moment we know we've got a human foot. We're hoping, obviously, to get some DNA from the examination that we're currently doing at the moment, and that will be fast-tracked through, and with any luck at all, we'll be able to identify to whom that foot belongs. The stuff that comes out the chute there, which is, as you say, he calls it the heavies.
Yeah.
So it's the heavies and the dense stuff. As it stands at the moment, clearly we've got a mystery. We've got a left foot and no body associated with it. We're hoping, through all the detailed searching and examinations that we're doing here at the site, that we'll be able to find some further body parts that might be able to marry up with regard to DNA to establish the identity of those parts.
A specialist police search team are being briefed at a recycling plant where a human foot has been discovered.
You know, everybody gets a chance of doing a bit. Whilst the staff were doing the recycling at the plant yesterday morning, they came across a human foot. I came yesterday afternoon with the SIO and CSI, and everybody agreed it's a foot from a human being. But there's potentially the rest of the body here. So basically, we're going to search specific areas, searching for the rest of the human remains. It's a shit job, but we know why we're here, we know what we've got to do, and how we're going to do it.
So a search on a site like this is so extensive that we have to make sure it's meticulous, and we have to make sure that we recover every piece of bone, fragment and tissue which could be related to our remains. Therefore, we've started from the larger sizes of waste, and we'll go down to the smaller sizes where we will ensure that a fingertip search is carried out so we obtain every single piece that may remain here.
This is area A1, A2. So concentrate on A1 until we got sufficiently far back. Any clothing that comes out, adult clothing, male and female, needs to be put on a ground sheet that we're going to be putting down here. All right? Any bones, fleshy bits, it's on another sheet, and CSI will sort that out straight away.
Ultimately, what we'd end up doing at mortuary is looking at a reconstruction, wouldn't we, of the body. So I think I'm happy for it all to go in one, yeah. And what you could almost look at doing is you could literally just have it as a body bag, with all the parts going into the body bag. And each day, and I'm just putting this out there, we could have it like each day we've got as body bag. Any parts we find each particular day goes in there, zips up, and that goes to mortuary. And each day we do that.
With the search system set up, the hunt for any remaining body parts begins, as does the full investigation. Focusing first on workers at the plant.
We spoke to all the staff at the recycling place, all the employees there, all the management, and we were as satisfied as we could be, having spoken to each and every one of them, that they had no involvement whatsoever in the body parts that had been found.
That's another bone. There'll be bones galore, but we don't know whether they're human or...
The team places numbered cones where human remains are found. CSIs will then photograph the area.
That's all we can see to start with without going into the pile. There's another bone on top, but we'll get them as we go through. Where number 9 is, there's a big lump of flesh and some bone and a bit of hair. We've no idea what it is. But obviously we'll take it out and then give it to the anthropologist to have a look at.
Anything that could be human is reserved, ready for the expert to analyse.
There's some stuff on the pile up there that look like ribs of some description, but I'm not to say whether it's human or not.
I'm going to put a marker on them, photograph them in situ.
OK.
And then lift them.
All right.
The expert forensic anthropologist drafted in for the case is Dr. Julie Roberts.
The police forensics team have been to the site and they've confirmed that it's a human foot, but they now require a specialist to come and assist with the search to see if there are any more body parts at the site. A forensic anthropologist is someone who specialises in human skeletal biology and anatomy. So we have an in-depth knowledge, and we use that to estimate things like age at death, biological sex, the living height of an individual, how robust, what their body build was like, and we can also look at individual identifying features that might make that person more recognisable.
We've got some bits already.
Yeah.
Which they're just photographing in situ before we pick them off and put them on a sheet for you to have a look at, if that's all right.
A forensic anthropologist for 25 years, Dr. Roberts is based at Liverpool John Moores University.
The foot had already been taken to the mortuary, so I was shown a photograph of what had been found. And actually, it proved to be a bit more than a foot, so it was part of the ankle and part of the lower leg, so probably about up to here. You couldn't see the bone. It was fully fleshed, and it had intact skin over the surface as well. But the size of the foot and the ankle indicated that it was adult size.
Forensic teams are used to adapting to different potential crime scenes. But Dr. Roberts and the team's expertise is being tested by the site and its unique challenges.
I was quite shocked by the size of it, actually. It took up the full length of a road. It was very, very dirty, piles and piles of waste material everywhere. The smell was quite distinctive, just because of all the rotting vegetation, meat and waste. A lot of animal carcasses there as well. It really was quite bad.
After hours of searching, finally, a new discovery.
Gerard, you've got some human maxilla there.
Anthropologists just going through some of the bones that we've identified, and we've got some teeth and palate mixed up with a load of animal bones. You're quite happy that they're human?
Yeah. So you've got some teeth?
Oh, blimey.
I don't know if you want to fast-track that.
Yeah, happy that they're human.
There's a lot of useful information that you can get from teeth if you have the teeth of the deceased, which can be really helpful when trying to figure out the identity of the living person. You do, however, need something to compare that against. So usually if you're going to get what we call a positive identification, we would also need to have the dental records of that person to compare them with the post-mortem records that we had. In this case, we had no idea who the individual is.
As the search continues, the team need to consider if this is one human body or multiple remains. The body parts are transported back to the mortuary, ready for a forensic post-mortem, and to try and obtain a DNA profile. This data is then interpreted by forensic scientist James Chapman.
The individual DNA fragments we're looking at are not especially unique or especially rare in their own right, but the combination of all of the DNA components makes the DNA profile unique. And one way of thinking about that is thinking about the national lottery, and what makes that national lottery number that you've selected unique is the combination of those numbers together. We've got the almost complete DNA profile of this individual as determined from the swabs that were taken from the foot, and that then allows us to see if we can compare that DNA profile with databases and see if there's anybody else with the same DNA profiles.
Firstly, the DNA is loaded to the National DNA Database to identify if the donor of the body parts is recorded on the system. Investigators will then look to load the DNA profile to the Missing Persons Database and then carry out searches worldwide through Interpol.
And that can then get forwarded around by Interpol to other nations, and they can then search their databases, and hopefully if they generate a match, they could feed that back.
Obtaining DNA and being able to search around the globe is just an amazing opportunity for us in law enforcement. It gives us that facility to be able to search further afield and around the globe, and that would always be supported from the National Crime Agency and Interpol.
At Interpol's headquarters, they connect police forces worldwide to locate missing persons. Interpol will be crucial in identifying if the body is a foreign national. Dr. Susan Hitchin and Dr. Francois Laurent specialise in global missing persons cases.
Morning.
Morning. So Interpol's primary responsibility is to facilitate the exchange of police data amongst our 196 member countries. For missing persons, we can assist police in the different countries by providing that secure network so that we can help to locate and find missing persons and hopefully reunite them with their families. Where are we on the stats this week for the notices?
So I think we've reached up to 16,000 yellow notice now.
A yellow notice is a global police alert for missing persons. It will provide information on the individual who's been reported missing, and this can be made public at the choice of the issuing country. Behind that notice, we can also have the police data, so the DNA, the fingerprints, and case information that will then be used in our databases to hopefully locate that individual. What have you seen come through with biometrics, in particular the DNA on the black and yellow since yesterday?
Since yesterday, we received quite a lot of DNA profiles from biological relatives from European countries, including Slovakia, for example.
As soon as we receive any request on a missing person case from a country, the biometric data will be inputted into our biometric databases, and a response will be given back to the country.
This information is stored on the Interpol database, allowing countries to regularly check their own missing persons cases for matches against uploaded data such as DNA.
Every message that comes in, we know that there is a detective seeking our assistance to make that international link.
1,000 kilometres away in Leeds, Detective Inspector Guy Shackleton is struggling to narrow down the volume of bin collections that arrived on the day human remains were discovered. It's a daunting task, yet it's currently the only lead they have.
We can narrow down when the body or body parts have actually gone to that location. So it's between 24th of October and 31st of October that we've narrowed down. Where it becomes a little bit difficult for yourself is we've got 95 skip deposits at that location.
Between those dates?
Between those dates, and we've got 172 vehicle deposits.
Right.
So that gives you an idea.
That's quite a lot.
Yeah. Now, it gets a little bit worse because what we then look further at is where are those pickups from? And what I can tell you on that is we are looking at West, South and North Yorkshire, and potentially a little bit wider than that because of effectively subcontracting as well.
How many premises are we talking from?
In a nutshell, we're talking thousands. We're not talking hundreds, we're talking thousands.
Really?
And I think if we're looking at being realistic and proportionate as to what we're trying to narrow down, I just think that's not achievable, really.
I think we can fairly safely say that this is going to be quite an extensive and complex investigation.
At the site, the team questions if there is more than one body, and if so, how they ended up here. They ramp up their efforts to uncover any additional human remains.
This is a very resource-intensive search because we have such a vast site, large amount of waste to search through, so it's pretty much all hands to the pump, and any licensed search officers that we have, if they are available, are being deployed to this site to assist in the search.
Dr. Roberts takes Sergeant Mick McGowan through the latest discoveries.
Oh, is that big bit?
Yeah, that bit from over there.
With the fork in.
Yeah, so it's got got most of the thigh bone, it's got a kneecap, and it's got the...
I can see it now.
Yeah, top part of the upper leg as well. We've got bones and body parts from different areas of the body as well, so we've got jaw, but we've got leg, we've got foot, so it's not just from one area. Can we have a photograph of this as well, please?
At this stage, the team is unsure if the human remains belong to one single individual or multiple corpses.
We've managed to now locate and recover quite a few body parts at this site, and we have been having discussions about what's called DVI. DVI stands for Disaster Victim Identification. It's a process that we often use at a major disaster. For example, a plane crash where you've got multiple casualties.
You've had a conversation regarding DVI?
Yeah, I have, my HMET. We're asking about keeping an open mind to whether we've got more than one deceased person here. And I said, well, if we start finding parts that would suggest that, then we will start looking at different processes.
We're relying on our scientific experts, our anthropologists and our pathologists to assist us because we still don't know whether we have just one body in the site or multiple bodies.
In West Yorkshire, human remains found 2 days ago in a recycling plant have left investigators wondering if they're dealing with just one body or possibly more.
So at this moment in time, we're going to stick with the process we've got with Pulsar doing a fingertip search and CSI team supporting that search.
SIO Tony Nicholson arrives for an update as Dr. Roberts receives another discovery.
So this is the one you've just brought?
This is the one that they've just brought out, yeah.
You've got skull here. You've got some of his head here.
You what, sorry?
You've got some of his head.
Wow. Head?
That's the base of his skull.
Wow. Base of his skull.
That's the back of his neck.
Back of his neck.
Yeah.
Back.
And his hair.
Yeah.
That's the back.
And that's the base of his skull, so...
That's just the skin.
Yeah, it's quite a thick part of the skull. We discovered some fragments of skull which were attached to some soft tissue. So just to show you on the diagram, this is looking at the base of the skull underneath here. We've got one small fragment at the back and one at the side there. And on this model, you can see it's just here around the edge of the foramen magnum, which is the hole through which the spinal column exits the brain. They were embedded in decomposed, disrupted soft tissue, which included the neck, and it also included the bottom part of the scalp. So we actually had some of the hair and the hairline at the back, so we could see the colour of the hair and the length of the hair. There were also some vertebrae embedded in that soft tissue as well.
It's very difficult to know at this stage in what direction the investigations are going to go. We're concentrating our efforts on continuing the forensic search of the premises of the property.
This latest discovery gives the police another valuable clue to help with identification.
I'll turn it over in a minute and I'll just...
What's this attached?
You've got a piece of arm bone here as well.
Arm?
Yeah.
How can you tell me just such a little bit? Jesus.
So it's all joined up.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Let's go and tell them.
Yeah, absolutely.
With each body part discovered, Dr. Roberts is increasingly sure that they are dealing with a single body.
Our working hypothesis was that all these body parts were from the same individual. And that was based on the fact that we didn't have any repeated bones or repeated joints. They were all the same in terms of size and morphology, in terms of size and shape, so they all seemed to look as though they belonged to the same individual. We also had a small number which could actually be fitted back together again. You couldn't be 100% certain unless you DNA tested every fragment, but on the balance of probabilities, we can be reasonably certain that these body parts all came from the same person.
It's very difficult to actually provide any sort of firm hypotheses as to what might have happened to this poor individual at this stage.
The question for detectives is, who might this person be? Across Europe, Interpol is contacting police forces to try and obtain a DNA match with the body part found in Yorkshire. Over 30 years, journalist Johan Romin has reported on many missing persons cases. Now, a disappearance from 20 years ago has caught his attention, and he believes it could be linked to the grisly discoveries in Leeds.
Mikael Ivarsson was an ordinary Swedish guy, 29-year-old. He lived here in Varberg in western Sweden. He was an ordinary guy. He had just bought a house. He worked as a machinist on a ferry. And he came from a loving family with a father and mother, 2 brothers and a sister. And also he had a 4-year-old daughter with an ex-partner and also an unborn child with a new girlfriend. Mikael Ivarsson was a guy who really loved motorcycles and traveling. He had been traveling all around the world. At one point he went with a motorcycle from Cape Town in South Africa all the way up here to Sweden. That's a long trip to do. And it says a lot about his kind of character, I think. And in 2004, he called his ex-girlfriend and told her, "You must go and pick up our daughter immediately." And the ex-girlfriend thought it was quite strange. And then he vanished without a trace.
For the past 2 decades, Mikael's body has not been found. No one knows if he travelled overseas. Knowing the body at the recycling plant could have come from anywhere, police are still without a solid lead.
If we're going to find big bits, it's going to be up from that lot over there, right?
The search shifts to any other items that might help with identification.
We were looking for anything that might be on the person who's ended up here. So that is clothing, jewellery, electricals, keys. And then once we've collected all this material, we then make the decision what's going to take us further in the investigation.
The team have also been collecting several mobile phones from the scene that could hold vital information.
We're assessing the phones that we've found so far, because we might have to link the phone DNA to the DNA that we've picked up from the parts that we've found. So if we can do that, then it gives us a chance on the intelligence front to see what we can get from the phone and potentially get further lines of inquiry from the items that we're finding within the rubble.
Because we seize and secure those items, it allows us to periodically, as this investigation progresses, to review those items to see if we've got anything that's relevant.
In Sweden, the investigation into the disappearance of Mikael Ivarsson 20 years ago continues.
Right before Mikael Ivarsson disappeared, he called his ex-partner and told her, "You must go and pick up our daughter." He had a 4-year-old daughter, and when the mother came to pick her daughter up, the child was doing something with a piece of jewelry, and she asked, what is that? "I got this from my daddy," the daughter said, and it was a piece of jewelry shaped as an anchor. It's quite strange because he was working on a ship as a machinist. I mean, it's connection to the anchor, but also this is the symbol of hope. The strange thing was that he also gave that kind of piece of jewelry to his unborn child.
So did Mikael Ivarsson intend to disappear? Another journalist, Per Lindqvist, asked these questions directly to Mikael Ivarsson's family.
They were really worried about what happened to Michael. The family talked about if it was any crime or like that, but they thought that Michael had no enemies.
After the disappearance, it was discovered that Mikael Ivarsson's car had been parked here in central Varberg.
When I talked to the sister, she said the sister Linda and Michael was really close and they talk about anything. And she said that no way, he never going to leave his daughter or children.
The ex-partner of Mikael Ivarsson became very worried. So she called the mother of Mikael Ivarsson, and later on they went to the house to look for him and to go through his things, and they saw that all his clothes were still in the house, and his passport was also there. So if he had left voluntarily and left Sweden, why would he leave his passport in the house? It's quite strange.
There was one lead that Swedish police tracked.
A couple of days later, they found a signal from his mobile phone in the south of Norway. The family thought at that time he worked as an engineer in a big ferry. Maybe he took the ferry to Norway, but they didn't know. And that's the last sign from Michael.
In Yorkshire, the search of the site continues.
So that's the knee there. That's the shin bone. And then the top bit's the... you've got quite a good length of it. And with this, you've got... that's the back and the base of his skull. And that's the top vertebra there, where the skull meets the head. And then there, you've got at least 3 or 4 bones from his neck. Yeah. And then you've got some of his arm bone there.
Saying he?
I am saying he. There's a lot of body hair if it's a female, but you never know. There's nothing definitively male yet, but they'll get that with the DNA. Even if they don't get an identity, they'll still find out whether he's male or female from the DNA.
DNA expert James Chapman is trying to determine the sex of the body.
So this very first area here, it's got 2 peaks with an X and a Y denoted against them. That's basically telling me that's a male DNA profile because it's got an X chromosome and a Y chromosome.
Knowing definitively that this person is male is a massive step forward. But there's also a major step back.
Domestically, we've searched it on the National DNA Database, got no matches.
This means the unidentified male has no criminal record in the UK and does not appear on the missing persons database. All hopes lie in a lead from the international search. Interpol, from their HQ in Lyon, liaises with police forces in nearly 200 countries.
In the UK, someone is reported missing every 90 seconds. And it's estimated that a quarter of missing person cases will have a transnational dimension. And this will require the exchange of police data across countries' boundaries.
So we're almost reaching 10,000 yellow notices, which are on the public Interpol website. We see a large increase in the request of countries to submit this data to other countries through Interpol.
In our experience, we don't actually see a type of person that goes missing. It could be male, female, different ages, young children, and it affects all parts of the world. So there are many reasons why a person may go missing. It may be that a young person has decided to run away from home. It may be that there are victims of crime that are then going to be unidentified.
2 decades ago, a family reported their 29-year-old son missing. The discoveries in Yorkshire may be their last hope.
And of course, the family wants to know what happened to their son, to their brother, to their father. In 2004, when Mikael Ivarsson disappeared from Varberg, it wasn't too much in the media about it. And then many people ask why wasn't this covered more in the national media? I think it was because the local police here, they didn't investigate this a whole lot.
Michael's family didn't think that the police did enough to investigate the case. The police said that if you are a grown-up, you can disappear if you want. And they don't start an investigation about that case.
As it stands at the moment, we've got a timescale where potentially our body has been deposited. We've got the foot, and then we've got another few pieces of body parts that we've recovered. We know that the foot belongs to a male. We've got DNA extracted from that, but there's nothing that's going to assist us on the national databases, either the National DNA database or indeed the MISPA database as it stands at the moment. We've also got a whole host, a multitude of different potential pickup sites, and that includes both industrial and indeed household. They feed back into this main site.
Yeah.
So at the moment, what else do we not know?
We can't even say if it's been a full body that's gone into the site, and then as a result of the machines that's being taken apart, or have we got a situation where, more sinister, we've got body parts that are being chopped up at a location away from there and has been subsequently dumped there.
After human remains were discovered at a recycling plant in West Yorkshire, police and forensics have been tirelessly searching for all the body parts. With time ticking away, the search team are feeling the pressure to deliver results.
So the team have just found this large piece of soft tissue, which is human skin, some decomposed muscle tissue.
All options are open, really. You could be talking about homicide, you could be talking about an accident, you could be talking about somebody was falling asleep and just died of natural causes in a wiggly bin for all we know at the moment.
And we've had that before, Tony, haven't we?
It looks as though it's probably from the torso, from the back, and also from the chest area, and possibly a belly button as well, and some body hairs. There are a couple of pieces of ends of rib attached as well to the inside of the chest wall.
Homeless people, drunk, that have climbed into wheelie bins to get out of the weather conditions, etc. And tragic accidents have happened. Yeah. But on the other side of it, we can't rule out something more sinister that has taken place, and I think that's where we've got to kind of go with it, really, haven't we?
At the site, police search advisor Mick is exploring a new lead. Could the body have been dismembered in the truck that brought it to the site?
So the process that they do is the rear of the wagon lifts up, which is the mechanical bit. Once it's opened that up, then they're able to lift the wagon up and push all the rubbish out, which you'll see now. So this bit picks all the rubbish up, tips it in, and then there's a compressor that pushes it down inside against that blade, and that blade then goes towards the front of the cab, which is basically squashing it all together. Once it arrives in the bin wagon, it'll be very difficult, unless somebody physically sees it, that will not be discovered.
As day 3 of the search comes to an end, less than a third of the body has been recovered.
I'm still hopeful in what we've got left to search, that we will continue to find items. Because of the process of the plant and the machinery that they're using to recycle, there could be quite a bit that's already left the site prior to us getting here. But I'm still confident, and I'll always remain confident until I finish the search.
Unexpectedly, the police then uncover a new lead. A missing local man suddenly becomes the focus. In the lab, forensics examine his belongings, including a toothbrush, for DNA.
So our research has now identified a potential missing person who we believe could be the unidentified human remains. So what we'll now do is we will send that toothbrush in for DNA testing. DNA can retain on items for a set amount of time, but factors regarding environment, how it's stored, where it's been, will have an influence as to whether we would actually get a DNA profile from it.
Could the DNA being taken from this toothbrush hold the key to identification?
I can't rule them in or out in relation to it being our body parts. I think it's one of those that we've just got to keep an open mind, and we've got to make sure that we cover all avenues.
With forensics still centre stage in the investigation, now shoes and clothing need to be analysed.
So far, all the flesh and tissue we're finding hasn't got any clothing attached, has it? No. We haven't been able to find any remnants of clothing on any of the body parts. It's hard to say whether the body was clothed or not because of the disruption that's been caused during the process at the recycling plant.
So what I've been doing is doing a little composite diagram. So the bones that are coloured in, that's what we've recovered.
Okay.
This drawing around is just the soft tissue disrupted muscle. So we've got those actual bones, and then we've got skin as well. Here, that looks like quite a large area. That's just skin. We don't have those bones within there.
At the forensic lab, the results from the toothbrush are in.
We've got a nice, clear and complete male DNA profile. I've compared that with the DNA profile that we obtained from the body parts found at the skip site. Basically, I've determined that they are not the same male.
The news is passed to the investigators.
The DNA testing has come back now, and that result has now confirmed that it isn't our missing person that those body parts relate to. It can be frustrating, but it's one of a number of lines of inquiry that we're undertaking at the moment.
With the investigation stalling, forensics widen their approach in searching for matches using alternative DNA testing techniques.
We'll look at other specialist techniques that can be done. So one of those is YSTR. So YSTR is where a female is XX and a male is XY. The Y is what's passed through the male line of a family. So father passes to son, who passes to their sons, and so on. Doing the YSTR profile may help us to narrow down our searches. We can also do what's called familial DNA searches on the national database. What that will give us, hopefully, tell us whether there's any parents or siblings of our unidentified male. Following that, I will then engage further with our forensic service providers of what other options are available, such as genealogy, where we start to look at relatives of the person.
When a police force can't find a match on the various databases, they reach out to Interpol and issue a black notice. This international alert seeks worldwide information on unidentified bodies.
Our Command and Coordination Centre could be considered as an international 999 call for those countries needing international assistance in their police investigations.
The UK Police's Black Notice appeal may now be the final chance.
Hi, Campbell.
Hey.
So we have this pending case. The DNA seems to indicate that it could be the same person. So the reason why a country can send DNA profile attached to a black notice is to alert other countries that they have a body that they can't identify, and they may believe that the answer is outside of their national borders. So they want to reach out to many countries and see if one of the country has some police information that could lead to the identification of the body. And therefore, when we receive it, the DNA profile is entered in our system, is searched against any missing person profile, and then if we find a potential connection, we can alert both countries and let them know that there is a lead that can be followed to hopefully get to the identification of the person. So in the case of unidentified body, we have the possibility to use different primary identifiers, such as DNA, fingerprint, or face, for example, dental as well. And so it depends on the state of degradation of the body. Sometimes we only find bones, for example, and the only solution is DNA.
Without key information like body age, the team are struggling to move the investigation forward. A lot is resting on the DNA. At the site, the team is frustrated. None of the larger body parts have provided any answers. The team is now sifting through piles of small, tiny fragments of waste.
It's a lot more difficult now because it is so small, so it means that we're going to have to go through it fingertip stroke with the actual tools just to make sure that we're not missing anything. Because if the process is right, the stuff that's coming out here is a lot finer, so it'll be crushed up more, so it will be finer pieces.
As a collarbone.
Right.
So that is human.
We found a clavicle, which is a collarbone. This was really useful for us because in terms of skeletal development, the clavicle is the last bone to complete its development in the body. So what we're looking at, particularly on the clavicle, you can see on this model, is this end here. That fuses quite late. So it can be any time between about 22 years and right up to 29 or 30, depending on the individual. When I assessed the end of the clavicle from looking at a CT scan, I could see that it was fully fused. So that gave me confidence that the individual from the recycling plant was at least 22 years of age at death.
Yet, even after 5 days of intensive searching, the lack of progress on identity leaves detectives with huge challenges. Having meticulously combed mountains of waste, the search has reached a standstill.
We have recovered all the human remains from the site, but that still only adds up to approximately 1/3. Therefore, the other 2/3 we can only assume has gone through the recycling plant and through the different processes and taken from that site prior to the police being alerted from staff who work there.
We were able to identify some marks on some of the bone which looked like claw marks from the machine that had caused the damage, indicating that the bones had actually been through the heavy machinery at the plant. However, we don't know how big that body part was originally when it went in. It looks as though the body may have been whole when it went through the machine, but we couldn't say that conclusively.
As the search on the site comes to an end, Detective Chief Inspector Damien Roebuck is reviewing the progress so far in the case.
We've been at the waste recycling site now for the past 5 days. We've put one of our Pulsar search teams through there, along with our forensics. I'm confident that we've recovered all the body parts that were present there, and we're going to be shutting the scene down.
The aim of finding the whole body is not just to identify them, is to identify a cause of death. Not finding the whole remains does limit our opportunities to identify them, but we still have the opportunity of DNA to identify who it is.
With DNA profiles uploaded onto global databases, investigators have the best possible chance of solving this case. But they must wait. Their attention now turns back to Sweden.
In 2021, Mikael Ivarsson had been gone missing for 17 years. And the family felt that maybe some other person in Sweden or in Varberg here had some more information, so they turned to the local newspaper.
The family made an appeal for more information. And Mikael's mother had her DNA taken by police and uploaded to an international database.
And the hope was that if they would find a body somewhere in the world and that DNA would match with the mother's DNA, that would bring maybe a conclusion to this case.
It's been 4 months since the human foot was discovered in a recycling plant in Yorkshire. With missing persons databases across the globe alerted, it's a waiting game.
In the last 24 hours, we've had a development where we've been notified that Swedish authorities received some notification that there had been unidentified body parts in the West Yorkshire area, and those body parts are a potential match for a familial sample that was provided by the mother of a missing person. So what we'll now look at is our next steps for this case as to what we're going to do and what as next options will be to try and identify whether in fact it is the same male. This could be quite a significant development. This might be the mother of our unidentified male.
Four months after a human foot was found in a Yorkshire recycling plant, the identity remains unknown. Now, Swedish authorities have informed West Yorkshire Police that the remains might be linked to Mikael Ivarsson, missing in Sweden for 20 years. The next step is to obtain DNA samples from Ivarsson's family to complete his profile.
In August 2021, the Swedish authorities obtained a DNA profile from his mother, and they provided that DNA profile to Interpol. The DNA profile from our unidentified male has also been provided to Interpol. From there, Interpol have then advised the Swedish authorities that the DNA profile they have obtained and the DNA profile we have obtained may well be consistent with being the mother of the male that we've located.
News has also reached detectives.
This is a massive breakthrough for the case going forward. I think when you look at the circumstances of we've got a missing person abroad in Sweden and it matches our DNA, there's further work to do to confirm this, but at this stage, yeah, it's looking promising that we might be able to actually identify our body parts.
As the investigation progresses, it's up to the detectives to follow the leads, wherever they might take them.
We've got numerous things recovered by Pulsar, and that's why we were so convinced we were on the right horse. We can't conclusively say at the moment whether our body parts are this missing person, but it was only right that the Swedish authorities approached the family to explain there is a potential link, and that's all it is at this stage. But obviously we've got to inform them because we are doing some further inquiries, or the Swedish police will be doing further inquiries on our behalf. So, you know, we had to give them the detail of what we'd found. So potentially their loved one has been found over here and unfortunately is deceased.
UK and Swedish police are exchanging information through Interpol to further the investigation.
So, what have we got here?
So, a very promising biological association. So, it's a pedigree with the mother of the missing person, and we found a potential match with a body. When we do kinship matching with the DNA from relatives, because the DNA of the missing person is not available, it's a bit more complicated because we're not looking at an identical profile, but parts of the DNA which are shared between biological relatives. And therefore we have many adventitious matches that can be, found.
Was there an indication in the information that came in that there could be additional biological relatives?
The family of Mikael Iverson is informed of the grim discoveries in Leeds.
2023, the police contacted the family again and told they had a possible DNA match from a guy in England with Lena, Michael's mother. Michael's sister, Linda, thought when they heard they got a match that it was Michael, because the police told it was a possible match. They started to talk to friends. Oh, no, we found Michael, and he was in Leeds in England. I think the family felt like, oh, now we got the answer. Now we know it was Michael, and now maybe we can go on with the life and get some closure.
But there's one final hurdle that could stand in the way of a definitive 100% identification.
Hello, it's the Interpol DNA unit. I'm calling about a missing person case ongoing. So if we take, for example, two people in the same room, they can have some positions of the DNA which are completely identical. But then you look at another region of the DNA and it's different. So it means that these two people can have a part of the DNA identical, even if they're not related. But on the last part that you will analyze, you will see that they are not related and it's not the right person you're looking for. So to minimize the chance of a wrong identification, you are supposed to look at many positions in the DNA.
With DNA results imminent, SIO Damien Roebuck pulls both detectives and forensic teams together for a briefing.
Right, good afternoon, ladies and gents. We're here to brief on Operation Parvin, the unexplained death of an unidentified male, which occurred on the 31st of October 2022. I just want to conduct with us all to get us head round the new information that was received. So for those who don't know, on Monday evening we received an Interpol notice with regards to a DNA match from the DNA we recovered from some of our body parts. That DNA match came from Sweden and it's identified a potential match. What we can say is that he is a white male. He would have been 29 years old at the time of his disappearance, which would make him 48, 49 now.
The Swedish authorities will have obtained the DNA from the mum as a reference sample with him going missing. They have got that information and then provided that to the National Board of Forensic Medicine in Sweden. They've done the DNA work. So similar to what I'm doing for us now, I'm getting our forensic department, our Eurofins if you like, to do that work for us as well now. So
it's not as if we've got his profile then.
No, they haven't got his.
In some cases we obtain the profile, don't we, through this technique. Yeah. It's not as if it's matched to him, so the match actually is to mum.
It's to mum, yeah.
DNA expert James Chapman adds to the police's theory that the remains could be those of Mikael Iverson.
We've compared her DNA profile to the DNA profile that we've obtained from our dead person, and we can see that they share DNA components at all of the areas that we can compare, so that we cannot exclude her as being the mother of our deceased individual. But there are some additional areas of DNA that we can test, and that's what we're currently doing at the moment.
Should we actually identify that this is our man, then I think we're going to have to look at some sort of press release with photographs as best we can get them. Okay, they're going to be from 2004, but putting them out into the press to say, right, who knows this man and what do they know him as? And that's where we'll build the intelligence picture to find out where he was living within the UK, all being well. The next steps are actually confirming it's him, of course.
The investigation reaches a critical moment. Could the body discovered at the recycling plant be that of Mikael Iverson? And could he have been murdered? A widespread forensic search of a recycling plant has uncovered the partial remains of a body. DNA testing has confirmed that the body is male and likely to be over the age of 22. DNA taken from a foot has revealed a potential match with the mother of a missing man in Sweden, Mikael Iversson. He was last seen 20 years ago.
If this is a potential the match, that's our starter for 10. We'll have a name, we'll have a person who we know has been living in England at some point. Under what name, we're not sure. We've run the name of the missing person from Sweden through our computer systems. He doesn't feature, but that's not to mean he wasn't living here under an assumed name.
Investigators continue to widen their search for any useful new leads in the case.
We're also looking at a new process called Forensic Investigative Genetic Genealogy. But what the FIG actually looks at is the direct-to-consumer DNA databases. Ancestry.com, 23andMe, they're worldwide. People like me and you, everyday members of the public, take a swab and they send their swabs off to be loaded in. That then looks worldwide to see which ancestry line do they come from. And it's just a wider database, an international database, that we can get more information from.
The forensics team continue their other inquiries, but the final DNA results from Sweden could take weeks or even months.
This is the first time I've come across it. Of course, it is, we can't conclusively say at the moment whether our body parts are this missing person. The Swedish police will be doing further inquiries on our behalf. So potentially their loved one has been found over here and unfortunately is deceased, but we can't progress that further without actually informing them and actually taking the samples from the family to rule him in or out, either way.
West Yorkshire Police and forensic teams have spent a total of 12 months trying to identify the human remains found at the recycling centre. And a family in Sweden are waiting to see if their loved one has been found.
It's been quite a difficult case, really, because without an identification and given the circumstances surrounding the discovery of this unidentified male, it's been very difficult for the investigation to even take off, really.
The results have arrived.
The immediate family of Mikael Iversson, even the boy that was unborn in 2004, has been tested, and they have now found out that the human remains found in Leeds has nothing to do with Mikael Iversson. So the family here in Sweden, they will still have the questions, what happened to their loved one?
The final news is a blow to both the police team and to Mikael's family.
The family was called by the police and had a meeting with the police and from one person from the National Board of Forensic. And they told it wasn't Michael. And then the family, they broke down. You can imagine if you thought it was Michael and then you get a new message that, no, it's not Michael.
While the DNA initially had a high probability match with Mikael's mother, the differences in the DNA on the male side ruled out the possibility of the remains being Mikael.
Michael's sister Linda told me that if you don't have a body, it's very hard to say a person is dead. And Michael's mother Lena told me that they think about Michael all the time and hope that one day he will return to his family.
It must be an awful feeling not knowing what happened to him. The family must keep on living with this uncertainty, what happened to Mikael Iversson, with all the desperation, with all the despair.
At the moment, it is professionally frustrating that we can't actually get the answers that we strive to get. So I will now look into wider options that are available, so going out into ancestry and genealogy, DNA opportunities, which are not routinely used or being tried and tested so much in the UK, but we never stop. The case will remain open. It doesn't stop now. We will continue to strive for answers, and for any future technology that becomes available to us, we will look to explore it for this case.
We've had bodies recovered which we've very quickly identified have been the result of a homicide. This is the first one I've had where we've had it in a recycling plant, an unusual area where you wouldn't necessarily find a body, and had to start from scratch. Genuine mystery is what we join policing for. It may end up, once we find out who this person is, it is a genuine whodunit, who's killed him. However, it's actually a who is it to start with, and who is he?
Next week, the audacious plot to defraud for millions that ended in brutal murder, the body in the bin Thursday at 9. And see justice unfold with dramatic stories of people facing trial in The Accused, Guilty or Innocent. Stream now on My5. Next tonight, 999, Police Hour of Duty. Stay with us.
Khi say đêm nay lại gần bên anh, lại đây bên anh. Em hỡi trước khi say đêm nay lại gần bên anh. Vẫn biết đôi ta chia tay nhưng trong lòng còn mê say, lại gần với anh. Lại đây bên anh, hãy nói ta luôn bên nhau rồi, tim ta chẳng đổi thay đâu. Hãy nói em không ra đi cho anh đừng buồn chia ly, lại gần với anh. Em ơi nhớ nhé, hãy cố quên đi thương đau và cười lên xin nhớ nhé. Hãy cố khơi lên trong ta bao nhiêu kỷ niệm đam mê, những lúc đôi ta còn trong tay đâu say sưa. Em ơi nhớ nhé, hãy cố khơi lên trong ta từng ngày qua bao đắm đuối. Hãy cứ như ta đang yêu, như duyên tình còn yên vui. Hãy tới hôn anh lần cuối, đêm nay rồi thôi. Lại đây bên anh, đã muốn xa anh đêm nay sao em nhạt nhòa nước mắt. Hãy cố vui lên em ơi, quanh ta dòng đời đang xoay, cuộc đời vẫn tươi. Lại đây bên anh, chớ nói ta nghe thêm bao nhiêu lời nồng quyến luyến. Sẽ thấy không lâu em ơi, đôi ta đành phải quên nhau, rồi lòng đớn đau. Em ơi nhớ nhé, hãy cố quên đi thương đau và cười lên xin nhớ nhé. Hãy cố khơi lên trong ta bao nhiêu kỷ niệm đam mê, những lúc đôi ta còn trong tay đâu say sưa. Em ơi nhớ nhé, hãy cố khơi lên trong ta từng ngày qua bao đắm đuối. Hãy cứ như ta đang yêu, như duyên tình còn yên vui. Hãy tới hôn anh lần cuối, đêm nay rồi thôi. Lại đây với anh, em ơi trước khi xa anh, đêm nay lại gần bên anh. Vẫn biết đôi ta chia tay nhưng trong lòng còn mê say, lại gần với anh. Em ơi nhớ nhé, lại đây bên anh. Em hỡi trước khi xa anh, đêm nay lại gần bên anh. Hãy vẫn biết đôi ta chia tay nhưng trong lòng còn mê say, lại gần với anh. Em ơi nhớ nhé, hãy cố quên đi thương đau và cười lên xin nhớ nhé. Hãy cố khơi lên trong ta bao nhiêu kỷ niệm đam mê, những lúc đôi ta còn trong tay nào say sưa. Em ơi nhớ nhé, hãy cố khơi lên trong ta từng ngày qua bao đắm đuối. Hãy cứ như ta đang yêu, như duyên tình còn yên vui. Hãy tới hôn anh lần cuối đêm nay rồi thôi. Ngày đây bên anh, đang muốn xa anh, đêm nay xa anh nhạt nhòa nước mắt. Hãy cố vui lên em ơi, một anh ta dòng đời đáng say, cuộc đời vẫn tươi. Lại đây bên anh, chưa nói cho ta nghe thêm bao nhiêu lời nồng quyến luyến. Sẽ thấy không lâu em ơi, đôi ta đành phải quên nhau, rồi lòng đớn đau. Em ơi nhớ nhé, hãy cố quên đi thương đau và cười lên xin nhớ nhé. Hãy cố khơi lên trong ta bao nhiêu kỷ niệm đam mê, những lúc đôi ta còn trong tay nào say sưa. Em ơi nhớ nhé, hãy cố khơi lên trong ta từng ngày qua bao đắm đuối. Hãy cứ như ta đang yêu, như duyên tình còn yên vui. Hãy tới hôn anh lần cuối đêm nay rồi thôi. Hãy cứ như ta đang yêu, như duyên tình còn yên vui. Hãy tới hôn anh lần cuối đêm nay rồi thôi.
In 2011, a young woman is last seen walking home from a nightclub in Swindon. She never returns.
She's disappeared in the middle of the night. What could have happened to her? Where is she?
About 400 to 500 members of the public turned up to help search the forest.
Bluebells grow in the spring and there's lots of deer, owls, and there's quite a lot of rare wildlife. But it's a large expanse. It's around 18 square kilometres, quite easy to get lost.
During the day it's beautiful, it's tranquil, you can hear the sounds of nature. But at night time when darkness comes, it's the last place you want to be. It's chilling.
The investigation becomes much larger than police could have ever anticipated.
It absolutely shook the community of Swindon. There's a lot of anger that someone could do this to someone that totally didn't deserve it.
Which, at that point, you could literally have struck me down with lightning. That was not what I was expecting to happen.
Savernake Forest, located in Wiltshire, one of the safest counties in the UK, lies 15 miles south of Swindon, in the southwest of England.
Savernake is a large forest situated just outside of Marlborough, just over the border in Oxfordshire. It extends over many, many acres, and whilst there are tracks and paths through it, large parts of it are effectively wilderness. and peaceful, law-abiding place.
A very beautiful place. There are a multitude of different trees, parkland, people take their dogs for walks there, and it's a very popular place, particularly in the summer.
It's really rare for crimes to occur of this nature anywhere, but in rural locations even more so.
That all changes on the 19th of March 2011, when a local young woman is reported missing after failing to return home from a night out.
These kind of incidents are very, very unusual and clearly have significant community impact when they do happen.
It was so unusual for her to go missing in these circumstances, for any girl of that age to go missing in these circumstances.
The missing woman is identified as 22-year-old Sian M. O'Callaghan, an office worker who lives in Swindon.
So Sian was a young woman in her 20s. She lived with her boyfriend. By all accounts, she was a young woman who had her life in front of her, and she had those aspirations and dreams that everyone has in their young 20s.
Sian was a very popular girl. Lots of people knew Sian. She had lots of friends.
Everybody spoken about Sian was just saying she was a lovely girl.
Sian's boyfriend alerts the police after waking up to find that she never returned home from her walk back from the nightclub just half a mile away.
The first person to call the police was Kevin Reap, who was Sian's boyfriend, and he called police at about 9:30 in the morning. So as far as he knew, she was meeting up with friends and they were going to end up in a nightclub in Old Town in Swindon called Suju Nightclub.
Saturday night in Swindon would be buzzing. There would be people out and about, going out and enjoying themselves, going to pubs and clubs and restaurants, just like any Saturday night in any town. Just before 3 a.m. that night, Sian decides to break away from her group of friends and decides she wants to go home. And she leaves the nightclub just before 3 a.m. Sian only lived 800 metres away from Swindon town centre. She hadn't far to go. She left on her own, but she wouldn't have been feeling any kind of danger. She had a pleasant evening. She was going home to the house she shared with her boyfriend, Kevin.
He'd had intermittent contact with her throughout the evening, but when she didn't turn up by about 3:30, 3:45 in the morning, he sent her a message on her phone asking where she was. Clearly, this message was never answered.
He starts to worry because she isn't responding to his messages, to his attempts to contact her. And he sends a message to her at 3:24 a.m. with one word, worried.
And this was highly out of character. There was no precursor events, there was no arguments, there was no discussion about her leaving. It was an unprecedented event within that family, and there was immediate concern. So her disappearance was treated as a high-risk missing person case.
Boyfriend Kevin is now incredibly alarmed. He gathers together people, friends, anyone he can get hold of, and they start looking around the surrounding area, and they're incredibly concerned.
We get many people who go missing people. There's thousands that go missing every single year. And whilst everyone is treated very importantly, you know those ones which just put the flag up straight away and we go, this is of real concern.
At the time, the senior investigating officer, Steve Fulcher, was my boss. I spoke to him and he asked me to come into Gapel Cross Police Station the following morning. He went through the circumstances of Sian going missing and the initial fast-track actions that were being pursued to help identify where she was.
At that point, we are thinking, how can we try and locate Sian? What could have happened? Has she fallen over? Is she hurt in any way? Or is it something a little bit more serious and that someone has taken her and she's come to some harm? So in any high-risk missing person inquiry, we will be utilising the media to try and identify where she could be. We're utilising CCTV opportunities. If we know where someone was, we could be searching that area. We can be making inquiries. We can be looking at our intelligence systems and trying to find out if anybody is in that area at the time that is of concern.
So when a call of a missing person comes into police, uniformed colleagues would be sent out and they would go and speak to the person who had reported them missing. They would search the home to make sure that the person hadn't actually come home and was just in a different place than expected. They would then make initial inquiries with friends and relatives to see if anybody knew where she might be, and then make inquiries with hospitals to see if she'd potentially been injured and ended up in hospital. When these proved fruitless, they then called in a CID where I was working. We were made aware of all the details around her going missing, and as much detail as they were aware of at that point about where her night had led her. Once we'd had a briefing, we were then allocated different jobs to do, and my job was to go and search the route that she would have taken from the nightclub back to her home address that she shared with her boyfriend. Partly my purpose for retracing the steps was A, to make sure she hadn't fallen somewhere and was injured, but B, also to scope for CCTV. And one of the CCTV cameras I located was at a pub called the Goddard Arms, which was not far down the road, but on the opposite side of the road to where the nightclub was that Sian had last been seen.
This became the last known sighting of Sian. What we could see from that CCTV image is that when she went out of screen in the building opposite, there was flashing amber lights, which we could hypothesise were from a car pulling up, putting the hazard warning lights on.
The car is stationary. The car is not moving. So that would indicate that the driver of the car had some reason to stay there and to stop. Was he conversing with someone? Was it Sian? Was he talking to her? Was he offering her a lift? The car then drives off and there's no other sign of Sian. The police make inquiries, house to house, door-to-door inquiries in the area. They can't put her past that particular spot. They speak to many people and that is the last known sighting. So the police theory at that time is that Sian got into that car.
The investigation into Sian O'Callaghan's disappearance has escalated to a suspected kidnapping. Police are focused on identifying the car seen in CCTV footage, as the initial hours are crucial to finding her alive. Wiltshire police are investigating the disappearance of 22-year-old Sian O'Callaghan, who vanished after a night out in Swindon in the early hours of March 19, 2011. Sian was last seen on CCTV, possibly getting into a car, and detectives suspect she may have been kidnapped. Their focus is to identify the vehicle and its owner.
It became our preferred hypothesis and Steve's preferred hypothesis that it was that car that had picked Sian up, and we were left with a grainy black and white image of a car. So we'd looked at that image and various people gave different thoughts on what car it might be. People thought it was a Mondeo, an Audi, a Volvo, various other makes.
The police also found further CCTV footage down the road, this time from a colour camera, that was able to show that the car in question was green and that it had a yellow square on the side of the door, which made police suspect that this was a taxi or a cab.
We were unsure what car it was, but we used some specialist services to try and identify what the car was, and it came back within a very short space of time that it was believed to be a green Toyota Avensis Estate. At that point, we were thinking, well, let's put this out to the media.
Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher used the press to put out press releases asking for anybody with any information about Sian. Friends and relatives of Sian were putting up posters and they were posting on social media, so as getting the news out as far and wide as possible so as many people knew that Sian was missing and were able to help look for her.
Coach loads of people came out, stopped what they were doing to go out and look for this missing woman who people deeply cared about. There was grave concern that something could have happened in that small area, particularly to a young female alone at night. If you didn't know about this girl, it was because you hadn't already been out of the house. Her name was everywhere, her face was everywhere.
Any girl of that age that goes missing and could have potentially come to some harm would be a very important case regionally. I think just the nature of the fact that it was so unusual to happen, it became national news, and the media latched onto it because she was an attractive girl who had gone missing and her picture was everywhere. And there was real concern within the community as well.
Sian's boyfriend Kevin made an emotional appeal at a press conference for Sian to come home, and for anyone who had any information as to her whereabouts to please come forward. This was a young man who loved Sian very much, and that comes across in that appeal. And he is desperately worried, desperately concerned. He wants his girlfriend to come home, and he is devastated at the fact that she is missing.
Police see that Sian's phone had been active near Savernake Forest shortly after she went missing, prompting a search by law enforcement and community members.
I think it demonstrates how important it was to the communities of Swindon and Wiltshire at the time, and the priority they placed on it, that people gave up their time to go and search for Sian. And we'd had some information regarding her phone which indicated that she could have been in Savernake, and we didn't appeal for the public to come and try and help us search, but the public had picked up on that, and they responded in their thousands. Literally coaches of people went out to Savernake, and it was logistically quite a challenge for us because we wanted to make sure that those searches were able to effectively contribute to the searches that took place. We didn't want people duplicating it, but there's also a health and safety issue there as well, because they were walking through forest. It's not even land. Some of them didn't have the right equipment or footwear to be able to do that. So it's tricky because you don't want to refuse people because they're trying to help you and they're trying to help find Sian, and that was what we were all trying to do. But at the same time, you don't want anyone else to be hurt or harmed as a result of their good intent.
I think people probably put themselves in the shoes of her parents and her boyfriend, and they thought if this was happening to our family, then that's exactly what we'd want others to do.
As search teams comb the forest, detectives looking into the vehicle have made a breakthrough.
An officer who had been reviewing the camera footage, the video footage from our traffic cars that were on patrol that night, who came into the briefing room with Steve Fulcher and myself and a few others, and said that they'd identified a taxi leaving the Old Town area with at the right time, and they had the number plate from the traffic car. When they checked that plate, it came back as a dark green Toyota Crevensis on a 57 plate, which was obviously corroborating what we'd been told by the other experts. Well, it was a monumental breakthrough. This was then the Tuesday lunchtime, effectively, so we were already some way into the inquiry, but this gave us a very strong suspect.
And that registration plate showed that the car was registered to a man called Christopher Halliwell. Christopher Halliwell was a 47-year-old taxi driver who lived at Ashbury Avenue in Swindon. He was cohabiting with his partner, and he had 2 daughters and a son. He didn't stand out to the police as the type of person they were looking for initially. The police immediately wanted to know about the movements of Christopher Halliwell. They wanted to know what fares he took, where he went in his taxi. They wanted to know everything about him.
We look into, was he working at the time? Where was his location, his phones, all that kind of thing. But ultimately, at that point, we just had somebody in that area who was driving that car. We didn't know if it was the same car. We didn't know any more than that. But it gave us suspicion that he became someone of interest to us at that point.
They spoke to his bosses, they spoke to the people who ran the taxi rank, and they told police that Halliwell phoned into them at 1:30 a.m. and said he was tired, he was going home, he was knocking off for the night, basically. And yet 90 minutes later, his taxi is still seen travelling around the streets of Swindon. Halliwell never went home. So what was he doing during those 90 minutes?
Police decide to conduct surveillance on Halliwell.
The police, bearing in mind they're dealing with a missing person here, they have to have hope that Sian could still be alive. and that if Halliwell has kidnapped her, that she is being kept somewhere but is still alive. The police want to find Sian. They want to rescue Sian. They want to bring her back safely to her family. They hope that by putting Halliwell under surveillance, and Halliwell has no idea that the police are looking at him, the police are hopeful that Halliwell unknowingly leads them to where Sian is. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Halliwell goes about his normal routine. He's working as a taxi driver, he's spending time with his family, he's taking fares and going along with his normal daily routine. However, there were things that he was observed doing whilst under surveillance that firmed up the police interest in him. The police also observed him cleaning out the back of his taxi with a blue fluid. And the police also observed him setting a fire to burn things in the middle of the night, which the police thought was unusual.
They found articles of cloth material. One of these was actually the seating from his vehicle, so from the back seat of his car. They were able to find that in one of the bins. So it was just various articles that were being dumped around and about. I believe that the ones in the fire were actually too badly burnt for them to be able to ascertain what they were.
There was an item, a perfume bottle that he discarded into a skip. And whilst taxi drivers would always clean their cars, it was giving us suspicion that this was more than just a routine clean after passengers, that he was going at lengths to try and remove forensic evidence from the car.
I think the most worrying thing, and the thing that struck and a chord with all of us, given that he was our prime suspect at that point, was that he put up posters about Sian in his car. And by this time there was national interest, but the local interest was immense in Sian and trying to find her. So posters had been produced and circulated widely, and he'd actually put those up in his taxi. And that was something that was troubling all of us.
So the senior investigating officer, Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher, was working on the hypothesis that Sian was alive and being kept somewhere. This was what's known as a crime in action. So it was very fast moving. They were following Mr. Fulcher, and they were very much relying on members of the public to assist them in their investigation. Whilst following Mr. Halliwell, they were alerted to the fact that he had gone into a supermarket in one of these out-of-town shopping places just on the edge of Swindon.
They observe Halliwell getting out of his vehicle, and particularly alarming for the police, they observe him leave with a huge ending your life.
Steve Fulcher's concern at that point in circumstances such as that, and clearly we didn't want that to happen. That wouldn't help us to find Sian, and it would definitely not help her family or her friends gain justice. So the decision was taken to arrest him at that point and to carry out what's known in policing world as an urgent interview.
Urgent interview is where time is running out and the life of the missing person is under threat, and the safety of that person and the chance of recovering that person alive is the main priority. So rather than take the individual to a police station to talk them through their Miranda rights and have them consult with a solicitor, they conduct an urgent interview right there at the scene of arrest.
When questioned, will Christopher Halliwell admit what happened that night and the whereabouts of Sian O'Callaghan? Wiltshire police are investigating the disappearance of 22-year-old Sian O'Callaghan, who went missing in the early hours of March 19, 2011, after a night out in Swindon. Using CCTV, investigators discover that Sian most likely got into a taxi owned by a man named Christopher Halliwell. The senior investigating officer, Steve Fulcher, has Halliwell arrested.
2 officers were sitting in a vehicle When Mr. Halliwell was arrested, he was put into the back of this vehicle, and straight away these officers asked him a number of questions. Where is Sian? How did she get there? You know, all the sort of questions, trying to ascertain where Sian was.
He wasn't initially forthcoming. Yeah, he simply didn't comment on his involvement at that point. He just said he wanted to go to the police station. So Steve intervened at that point, because that would have routinely been what would have happened. The urgent interview had effectively been exhausted. There'd always been a suspicion from some of the telephone data we've been able to acquire that he could have been out to Barbary Castle at one point.
Fulcher commands search teams to focus on the areas surrounding Barbary Castle.
Now, Barbary Castle was a beauty spot on the outskirts of Swindon, and Steve had initiated some searches that were taking place. So on that morning, the Thursday morning, there were search teams in and around Barbary Castle.
He made the decision to meet Halliwell and question him himself at that location. So he instructed the detectives to take him there, and he would urgent interview him there. His reasoning for that course of action was he believed that if Halliwell was being taken close to where Sian's body was and speaking to him as the SIO, that he might realise the game's up here and he might cooperate better.
Fulcher's unorthodox approach raises some concerns within the police force.
I support Steve on what he did. It was a very brave decision, and you need courageous SIOs in that scenario. And my role at that point, I actually drove Steve out there along with his PA, who'd been making notes of everything that had been happening over the preceding days. And as I drove him out there, I said to Steve, "Are you really sure you want to do this?" Because it was such an unusual thing. And he looked me in the eyes, really, and he'd spoken to Sian's family, he'd met Sian's family, and he said, "I've promised Sian's family I'm going to get her back, and this is the only way."
Mr. Halliwell gets out of the car and goes off with Detective Superintendent Fulcher, and Mr. Fulcher asks him, "Where's Sian?" Initially, he won't talk to Mr. Fulcher. He won't answer any questions. He keeps saying he wants his solicitor. But eventually, just as Mr. Fulcher thinks he's going to have to give up and take him back to the police station, Mr. Halliwell says, "Have you got a car? I'll take you to her."
After a few minutes, Steve, Halliwell and his PA got into a marked car and started to head off from Barbary Castle, and I followed them. And at that point, we were probably going back to Gable Cross Police Station. I thought we'd that further. Load, which to this day I was just nervous of showing Steve Fulcher in the cold light of day what he'd done to Sian.
They brought out the search teams to do a proper forensic sweep of the area to see if they could find Sian. And the search officers would have a lead search officer who would dictate exactly what formation they used, and they would, in a very studied manner, they would work their way down the area that Mr. Halliwell had pointed to until they found what they were looking for.
The investigation into Sian's disappearance reaches a devastating end.
When I received a call that he'd taken us to Sian's body, utter despair that she's dead, very pleased that we'd managed to find her. And at that point, I start to put in motion forensic teams to go to the scene, traffic teams to secure the area, all the procedures that you'd normally undertake when a body is found. He disposed of her from the road into a ditch, which was some distance away from the raised road in undergrowth, that it would have meant it would have been a long time before she was found. I believe that the location was such that even the farmers didn't go into that particular location much, so it would have been some time.
Sian was found naked from the waist down, and she had died as a result of a stab wound to her head. It was a particularly brutal murder.
I hope that he didn't sexually abuse her. The fact that she was naked from the waist down obviously raises that concern. There was never any conclusive evidence to say that she was sexually assaulted. He did whatever he did, and I just hope that he killed her quickly and as far as possible painlessly from Sian's perspective. The fact that he took the steps he did afterwards are chilling. The fact that he chose to put posters of Sian being missing in his car, driving around Swindon trying to get other taxi fares, goes a lot to say about who he is.
Sadly, I was the one that had to also tell them that Sian had been found. That is something you never get used to. As police officers, we deal with some harsh things that we have to deal with, and what we call passing death messages. This is one of the things that we do, and no matter how many times you do it, it never gets easier. So passing that message that's one of those jobs that will live with me. It doesn't come up in my mind very often, but it's there, and it was hard. They were devastated, but you're there to support them and help them through it. So it was a very difficult case, but I remained with the family throughout the whole of the case.
DS Vulture has the harrowing task of contacting the police station and informing them that they have found Sian O'Callaghan's body. They then send in a team of forensic scientists to preserve the scene, and they make arrangements for Christopher Halliwell to be returned to the police station in Swindon, where he can be read his rights, meet with his solicitor, and then undergo questioning. They are still at the scene where Sian O'Callaghan's body was found. He and DS Vulture, in that short period of time together, had built up somewhat of a rapport together. DS Vulture had successfully got inside Halliwell's head and had gained some trust. They are sharing a cigarette, and Halliwell leans into DS Vulture and said, "Me and you should have a chat." And DS Vulture, not knowing what was coming, said, "Yes, okay, what do you want to talk about?" Perhaps thinking Halliwell was going to give more details about Sian's case, he instead says to DS Vulture, "Do you want another one?" And DS Vulture inquires, "Another what?" To which Halliwell replies, "Another body."
Steve then came over to me and said that he was going to take us to another. And I had to clarify, what do you mean another? And he said to another body, which at that point you could literally have struck me down with lightning. That was not what I was expecting to happen.
Christopher Halliwell's admission forces investigators to confront the chilling possibility that they may be dealing with a serial killer.
To find one body is shocking. To be told that there's a second I don't think many police officers would have that in their career. And I told the senior officer straight away, the Deputy Chief Constable at the time, and had to inform them that this was the case. And straight away that led us to believe that, you know, this was going to be bigger than we initially thought.
D.S. Fulcher found himself in such a precarious position because he had a number of choices to make and so little time to make them, because this was a moment in time. This is a moment in time between two people, two individuals, between a killer and the detective hunting him down. And the killer has all the power because the killer has the knowledge. The detective wants the knowledge. He has to make the decision on what way to go, because if he goes off path either way, the whole moment could be over. The whole moment could be ruined, and the information that he really needs could be lost forever. He decides to break away from the PACE protocols. The PACE protocols are the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1985. He decides to break away from that and decides to go along with Halliwell and question him without arresting him for this new confession. Doesn't read him his rights, doesn't get him a solicitor. He decides to take that risk for moral reasons, because he knows I have the chance here to uncover the body of a human being that's also missing.
It is a decision that jeopardizes Fulcher's career.
Fulcher has the position of, if he takes Halliwell back, procedure dictates, PACE regulations, that you have to take the individual back, formally charge them, offer them a lawyer, read them their rights, and a process has to go through for a police investigation to start. However, he has created this unique bond with this violent killer, and he is aware that this bond is fragile. He is aware that this stream of information, which has previously not appeared from Halliwell, or indeed at any other point in the case, might only exist in that moment. It might only exist there and then in this forlorn place that they're standing, where this poor young life had been snuffed out. And he is in a position where he is stood there with Halliwell looking at this killer, knowing that this information wasn't available 10 minutes ago and it might never be available again.
Detective Superintendent Fulcher thought, I'm going to go with this. So they got back into a vehicle and Mr. Halliwell directed him out to a field, again in the middle of nowhere, in Gloucestershire. And he said, there's a body in that field. And following an excavation by police, they located the remains of another female called Becky Godden Edwards.
In a shocking twist, Christopher Halliwell leads Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher to a second body. However, as Halliwell has not been read his Miranda rights, the case has become significantly more complicated. In the early hours of March 19, 2011, 22-year-old Sian O'Callaghan disappears after a night out in Swindon. CCTV shows her getting into a taxi driven by Christopher Halliwell, who is later arrested. Detective Steve Fulcher brings Halliwell to a search site near Barbary Castle, where Halliwell eventually reveals where he buried Sian. But just as they're about to return to the station, he leads Fulcher to the body of another young woman.
The body that was recovered in Eastleach was that of Becky Godden Edwards, a young woman in her early 20s who disappeared on the 27th of December 2002 after being seen getting into a taxi outside a nightclub in Swindon. Becky had a loving family around her. She was very well loved, very well liked, popular young woman, but unfortunately she had fallen on some hard times around the time of her disappearance.
I still believe we would never have found Sian and we would never have found Becky if it weren't for the intervention of Steve and the urgent interview.
Halliwell confesses what happened the night he abducted Becky to investigators at the scene.
Halliwell explained in very simple, concise language that he'd taken Becky from Swindon, that he'd driven her out to where we were. that he'd killed her, that he'd indicated that he'd strangled her. He indicated that he'd left her behind the wall, and we were stood in a field with a wall as the boundary. And he then explained that he'd come back the following day, and that's when he'd buried her. And he indicated to Steve and I the point where he'd buried her. And what stands in me, and which I'll never forget, it was his eyes. So he had blue eyes, and they were piercing and steely. And he was very matter-of-fact in what he told us.
There's been a lot of speculation about whether Christopher Halliwell has killed more people, and I know Steve Fulcher believes he has. I know of some of the inquiries that have gone on since then, and to date, nothing has been found to show that he has killed anybody else. He'd have had a lot of lone female passengers during that time, and I suspect if you're subsequently one of those and you knew that he was later convicted of double murders, you'd be very concerned.
But there was a brief discussion about whether or not there was anyone else that he needed to take us to, and the words that he used were something very similar to "not today," which stays with me as well. But at that point, Steve, I think, felt that we had to sort of draw under a line under what was happening. So Steve and Halliwell went back in the police car, and they went off and to Cable Cross police station.
The trial is delayed due to Detective Fulcher's actions during the investigation.
So Mr. Halliwell would have been taken the following day. He would have been remanded in custody, and he would have been taken the following day to the Magistrates' Court, where again he would have been remanded in custody for further investigations and for the trial, for preparation for the trial. During the course of the investigation, one of the avenues they had to go down was a thing called a voir dire. This was when they went to court to hear the facts of the case. And the facts of the case were around where Mr. Halliwell was not given access to a solicitor and where he was not cautioned when he should have been. So this had to be heard in front of a judge. Now, this hearing took five days. And during that, they were given all the evidence. Mr. Fulcher was given his opportunity to put forward why he didn't comply with the requirements of an arrested person. The judge, however, in this case ruled for Mr. Halliwell and said that anything from the point of his initial urgent interview, anything after that was not allowed as evidence within the case. So this included pointing out where Sian was, and it included pointing out where Becky Gordon-Edwards was. Thankfully, they had a fair amount of other evidence, forensic evidence, in relation to the murder of Sian, and they were able to build a case around her murder. However, around Becky Gordon-Edwards, there was only the word of Mr. Halliwell, who had taken them to the field where she was located. So they had to disallow that from the hearings that went to the first trial at court. Yes, they had their daughter returned to them, but it also meant that the person who had admitted to killing her by taking officers to the field where she was buried, that evidence was not allowed, and there was no trial in relation to her.
Christopher Halliwell appears in court on the 31st of May 2012 for the murder of Sian O'Callaghan and pleads not guilty.
I think is well known. It took many years for this case to come to court for a number of reasons, but the trial from memory is 2016. I gave evidence immediately after Steve Fulcher, and that was quite challenging, really, for, as is his right, Halliwell had sacked his defence team and represented himself at his trial. And when Steve Fulcher had finished giving his evidence, Halliwell had made some really unsavoury comments towards Steve, basically gloated in the fact that he felt he'd ruined Steve's career, which is a bizarre and random thing for anyone to take pleasure in, but that was what Halliwell did. But those comments and statements caused a bit of a ripple through the court, certainly through the public gallery.
He represented himself in court, which made the spectacle even more unbearable for the families of Sian and Becky, and the performance of watching him wriggle around details, denial, failure to answer any questions. This was a man who didn't feel any level of shame at what he'd done or at what he was accused of.
His demeanour in court was what you would expect from a hardened criminal, from an utterly depraved, evil man. He was smirking at family members. He was looking quite relaxed, like he hadn't a care in the world, like he was totally free from worry. He didn't really care.
His defence was that she attacked him, and it was self-defence. That was a man just trying to grasp onto anything that he could think of in those moments when he knew he was going to be convicted and face a full life tariff.
19th October 2012. Christopher Halliwell pleads guilty to her murder. He is sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 25 years.
It's indescribable. Unless you've been through it yourself, you can't ever really relate to it. We can all imagine what it would be like to lose a loved one, but not many people will have lost a loved one in these circumstances. And that will be very, very difficult for anyone to come to terms with. And you have to admire the families of Sian and Becky for the way they have handled coming to terms with what Halliwell did to them.
As Halliwell is being transported from the prison to the court, there are people on the streets. The community are out and they are angry. They are throwing things at the prison van. They are banging their fists off the prison van side. There is a level of anger and outpouring of rage at what this man has done. It is reminiscent of similar actions from the public when you're dealing with particularly infamous criminals who have carried out some truly horrific crimes. So that demonstrates the level of infamy that Halliwell was beginning to attain and the anger that the public had for him in Swindon.
Killers very often don't look or appear outwardly evil. They look entirely like normal people moving amongst all of us. And when people are confronted with the horror of this individual, a man that was driving a taxi that was potentially capable of taking any number of individuals in the course of their job, driving around the town, people's feelings, emotions about the case reached boiling point. There had been murals around Swindon of Sian's likeness. She was called Swindon's Angel. There was vigils, there was candles lit everywhere, commemorations in churches. Her name and her memory were constantly on local news, radio, national news.
Police did an amazing job. They very quickly ascertained the vehicle that was being used, and this was great police work to have the forethought to look through the ANPR cameras on traffic vehicles, and then Detective Superintendent Fulcher locating him, arresting him before he was able to do anything with the tablets, which potentially he had bought to harm himself. You know, the police work was fabulous. There are questions around the way Mr. Halliwell was dealt with when he was apprehended, but ultimately 2 women were returned to their families because of the actions that he took that day.
I think it's well documented and well publicised that other SIOs would have dealt with this case differently. I'd go as far as saying that I don't know any other SIO who would have taken the steps that Steve did when he went out to Barbary Castle. But perhaps that's a reflection on us rather than Steve, because what I would say as well is that if one of my daughters went missing, I'd want Steve to investigate it because I'd have the confidence that he would find her, and that's what happened in this case.